I heard modeling. I'm like, yep.
Fantastic.
Whatever. Yep.
It's interesting because you've already mentioned the thing that when you first volunteered, automatically came to mind for you as something which I know that you've done because you've mentioned it on social media a few times, and also something which I think there's an awful lot of people out there who would be absolutely fascinating with it. And you've mentioned that you dropped 42 pounds. Over what period of time was that?
That was started, well, it'll be a year next month.
Yeah. And I wondered if you would be okay with us talking about that today.
Yeah. I was thinking of something else, but yeah.
Well, you know, maybe we'll have a time to do a couple. What was the other thing that you were thinking of?
Well, with the modeling and all that, I always had this ability to take anything complex or any new material, ascertain the fundamental principles, shrink it down, and teach it to somebody else. And I have no idea how I do that.
Okay. Well, what I would propose then, if it's okay with you, is, as you can imagine, with the modeling process, the more precise we are and the more we focus on the specific thing we're looking for, the quicker and easier it is. So people tend to get themselves tied up in knots when they're modeling, when they're trying to model something really big like leadership, which is just a huge subject. And also it's a difficult thing to model because it isn't a behavior. It's a relationship between two people. And so we can't only model one person and then understand what that is. So I think we could probably get a couple of things done if you have time and you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I'm going to hazard a guess that I suspect these two things are connected as well.
Very well might be, yeah.
So let's try really zooming in on the weight loss thing, because you know there's hundreds of different diet programs, plans, exercise. You know, every celebrity's got a book, a program, or something about, you know, their magical diet. Just live off an egg a day for the next year, and you'll
really
have, you know, wheat shakes and what everyone's got a plan and their own theory about how they did it. But what I've noticed in talking to people who've done this is that's almost the secondary part. The first part is getting your head around the kind of lifestyle change that's required. And what I'm particularly interested in is I wondered if you were able to identify the moment, because I'm guessing, like a lot of people, you'd thought about it for some time. You'd thought, you know, I could do with losing some weight, I could do with getting into shape, maybe tentatively tried, and, you know, and then there was a moment when something switched in your mind and it became much easier beyond that point. It was no longer something that you had to do or try to do, or something that you had to make an effort to do. Suddenly something switched in your lifestyle. And I'm interested in exploring that moment, if you can identify with that.
When I got leverage, right? I would say I'm trying to think of a specific time, but I know it was a time period where the belt was, you know, constantly getting to buy a bigger belt, and the bigger pants were getting tighter. And I just, at one point I was like, this can't keep happening.
I'm probably going to have to kind of start you and stop you and just zoom in. And it's not because I'm, you know, not interested, because I'm really trying to sort of pick up on the clues that you're giving. So it sounds like when you said about the bigger belt, the bigger pants, it sounds like you'd already had a level of compromise, and then you were reaching the end of that level of compromise. It's like
that'd be a fair way to say it.
Belts, and then so it was like because we're putting on weight and losing weight all the time. We're both losing weight right now as we speak. in minute by minute, you'd need special equipment to measure how much weight we're losing minute by minute. But when something happens that's a tangible step, like the size of a belt, and people talk about having to go up a hole on the belt, or you've talked about buying a new belt. So it sounds like there was a moment where you'd reached that sort of second threshold. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that'd be a fair way to put it.
And at
then
that moment, what was it that was in your mind?
I can't really remember. I know I wasn't happy about it. There was certainly an emotional reaction to as I was. There was a day, and I was getting dressed for work. I was putting one of the bigger pants on because I had to, level up. And I remember just getting so disappointed with it because I used to be an athlete. I was, I remember as a kid looking at the dad bods on the block. I'm like, that's never going to happen to me. And getting, starting things then started to congeal in my head. So I would start attaching, oh yeah, I'm getting winded just walking down the block. I can't go up a flight of stairs. The acid reflux is out of control. I have asthma, my knees are out. It all started to gel together. And then at that point, I went to work, and I noticed that one of my coworkers looked a little bit thinner. I'm like, what are you doing? How are you losing weight? He goes, oh yeah, I'm on Weight Watchers. And then I thought, oh, I could do that as long as there's no meetings. I'm not doing the whole meeting thing, right? He's like, no, it's app, it's online, it's whatever now. So I'm like, oh, okay. Because I just needed a plan, a viable plan, because I wasn't doing the wheatgrass shakes, and I tried keto for 2 days and I started chewing on my own arm. So I couldn't do that. I did Atkins once before, years ago. It worked great, but my cholesterol was over 300. So I was like, okay, we're not doing that anymore either. So I just needed something that made sense to me, and that did. And I said, okay. And I started it. And then after a couple months on that, and started seeing the weight coming off already, I hit the first plateau. And I called one of the coaches and asked, what do I need to change the meal plan, whatever it is. And she's like, oh, well, you're exercising. I'm like, not really. And she goes, no, you really need to do that. So that was even tougher for me than the actual diet part. Because I could, the app tells you how many points you got. It's just a matter of strategy. It's not that bad. But then when you have to come face to face with, the knees are out, but you're trying to walk anyway, and getting winded in 10 minutes and all this stuff. And it was probably pure will at the beginning. It wasn't enjoyable. I didn't like it. It was defeating if I focused on how bad I was feeling. But I trooped it out. And then I was able to jog a few steps here and there. Then I started to jog a few more steps here and there. Then I was able to run a few steps in the middle of the walking. Then I kept going and going and going until I was able to replace the walking with running. And then it was pure runs after that. Then I started really shooting the moon, and I was able to do wind sprints and all kinds of stuff, hour runs eventually, all that, for a guy whose knees were out. So I thought that was, very encouraging, very impressive. Now, eventually the knee injuries did catch up to me. So now I had to switch to a rowing machine in the last couple of weeks. But because I know the injury, once it's aggravated, it's going to keep going out on me. So
that's interesting. Even giving that physical constraint of your knees, rather than using that as a reason to stop, you've switched to a different form of exercise.
Yeah, I've fought way too hard to get. I'm actually, just to be honest, I'm actually probably in better condition now than when I was in my 20s.
You said the Weight Watchers, you said you needed something that made sense to me. So what was it about that system that you're describing as made sense?
That you could eat normal food. You didn't have to have any kind of restriction. You weren't ordering like Jenny Craig meals or things like that.
So sorry, what is it about ordering regular food that was important?
If it would be sustainable.
So I'm going to make a guess here, but tell me if I'm wrong. Does that mean that you could imagine yourself following the plan?
Yes.
Within your normal life routine, family routine, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Not having to do something separate to your family or order very different things.
Or even to where it would become inhibitive to me personally, right? So again, chewing on the arm with keto, that wasn't a thing, having to I just needed it fairly easy to follow, where I found it would be easy to sustain. Because I started in October, so I was going to go into Thanksgiving and Christmas pretty early in that game. And I already decided those 2 days, I didn't even turn the app on. I didn't even bother to count the points. And I was fine with that. And I was okay with that. And the weight loss kept happening anyway.
And that's another interesting thing that a lot of people, as I'm sure you'll have heard as well, will get to one of those points and they'll say, right, that's it. I've ruined the diet. I may as well stop. I may as well give up. But it sounded like you had a longer term view, that you saw that 1 day or that 2 day celebration. Yes, your calorie intake would go up, but that's not going to be it's going to be a slight detour. It's not going to stop you from being
right. And I think the important part of that was the mindset, in that a lot of people will say something like, oh, I blew it, that's it, because they might not really be committed. So that's a really good excuse. This is a deal breaker here because I already went off of it 1 day, as opposed to I was very committed to this and I was seeing it long term because of that commitment. So 1 day here and there, even now I'll still do a cheat day every now and again just to shake the metabolism up. If I find I hit a plateau again, sometimes you have to do what's called fool the metabolism, and you actually load a day and then cut back, in points the following day, and your metabolism's like, what are we doing? And it just fires back up again.
Yeah.
So that's actually even part of the strategy.
So there's something that you said right at the very beginning that I think was quite critical to all of this. And I think it's important to get a contrast. You said about going up the belt size, the bigger pants, you felt disappointed and you thought to yourself, I used to be an athlete. So one of the things that I think often happens with people is they compare themselves externally, and people talk about external role models and expectations and, how they look to others, or, symbolism in the media and images of celebrities and so on. And people are comparing themselves to that. And I was wondering if there was a stage before you really got your head around the whole program that you started on. I wondered if there was a stage where you had a sense of that, either comparing yourself externally to other people, wondering what other people thought, or I wonder if there was anything like that in your mind before you were at that tipping point.
Excuse me. No, not really. that I could recall. Because as far as my family goes, they were kind of used to seeing me like that. I'd been overweight for years at that point.
Well, I'm wondering if, for example, you saw photos of yourself and thought, yeah, I need to do something about that.
No, not really. Not around that time frame.
Because obviously there was a period of time when you gained weight, and therefore, whilst we've talked about that kind of tipping point where it really came into your awareness when you were putting on the bigger pants,
mhm.
it was also something that hadn't completely taken you by surprise. It sort of crept up.
Mhm.
I'm guessing there were points before that at which you thought, yeah, this is something I need to think about, or I need to take action on
I
this.
think it was more earlier on. It was more of uh, an acceptance, almost a clandestine internal agreement. Like, okay, it was 36, now I'm 38. It's okay. It's not, Then I hit 40 waist, and I'm like, now
That
that's,
sounds like a big number.
yeah, the alarms are going off. Like, I don't. Then I hit 42,
Right.
and then those were getting tight,
Mm.
and I'm like, the next stop is the big and tall section. Like, what's happening here?
These are all like thresholds, the
Yes.
sizes, the departments, or even the type of stores.
Mm-hmm.
These are like
Right.
thresholds that you were reaching. And so the thing I
Exactly.
thought was interesting about when you said I used to be an athlete was it was like you were comparing yourself to yourself at different stages of your life.
Yes, that's definitely part of it. It was a matter of, thinking what I used to be able to do,
Mm.
and there's still some of that. Every once in a while, because I was a full contact karate competitor for years, and I would be able to put my foot behind my head. I could kick above my head. Now if I kick to the waist, I'm in an emergency room in hospital somewhere. So, it's every once in a while I forget, especially now that I'm back in shape, and I'll push. And every once in a while, my body has to remind me, you're 55, not 20 anymore. You need to ease off some. Uh, when I first re-injured the knee, I had to take 2 weeks off of running per doctor's orders, and I lasted a week before I started speed walking it, at least, and then I re-injured a second time because I rushed back too quick, and I was like, okay, time to get a rowing machine, because I'm not going backwards, that's for sure. But there's always that internal comparison when it comes to
What's
image.
really striking me about this is how many internal comparisons you're making, and then there are no external comparisons. And what I find with people who struggle with weight loss or getting into shape or making any sort of change in their lives, they'll make external comparisons,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll give them a certain level of motivation, but that motivation never becomes fully internalized. They're always comparing themselves, waiting for somebody else's judgment or feedback or guidance or whatever it might be.
Right.
And you're comparing yourself to yourself, both visually and also in terms of your physical experience. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to walk without getting out of breath, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and remembering a time when that wasn't the case, when you were younger. So it seems like you're making a whole load of different physical comparisons, and actually that's then I wonder if that's then causing you to, like you described with with your knees and the running, that you start to think that you are that young man again. You forget that.
Well, that's part of it. But I think a bigger part of it is how I frame it to myself. So to me, it's more heroic, so to speak, to run through the pain and be done anyway. Being a martial artist, right? You get hit, you keep moving forward, right? So, my kung fu is strong. I'm gonna keep going, and that frame is actually what keeps driving me to move forward, because I'll take something and say, okay, well, the average person would quit. So I have to show that I'm not the average person, and I'm going to keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it sounds like you came to associate the difficulty, whether that was physical difficulty caused by injury, or whether that was more mental difficulty of
motivation wise, yeah,
motivation, or reaching the plateau, as you said. It sounded like you came to associate the difficulty with that sense of being more than average, that sense of, how would you describe that? Achievement or success, or what word would you use for that?
It's an interesting question. Nothing really comes to mind for that. I mean, achievement, all those, yeah, but they don't really.
They're not
cover
the right word. They're not.
Yeah,
right
it's not quite covering it. Fulfillment, I guess, would be a closer one. Self-fulfillment would be closer than achievement, I would say.
Yeah. So when you were facing difficulty, and you're gathering whatever resources you need to get through that difficulty, there is something in that which is fulfilling. And the word fulfilling obviously tells us there is something being filled full. So there was some need that you're demonstrating, or the need that you're filling, that you're fulfilling literally by getting through that period of difficulty. So what would you say is the need in you that is fulfilled by you being the kind of above average person who gets through those periods of challenge?
That's a loaded one. So let's just say when I was younger, that drive wasn't there as much.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fear-based decisions when I was younger. A lot of trying to back out of things, not really wanting to follow through after a while, all that kind of stuff. So as I got older and I eventually reframed all that, and it became a driver to me, so that anything I do now, I have to master.
Yeah.
One way or another, whether it's weight loss, to me, that's pretty superficial, but there's multiple components of that. Whether it's neurolinguistics, whether it's EFT hypnosis, or any of the other stuff that I do, just like then, that was the only, right. I lived it, breathed it, slept it. But at the same token, I always had an internal conflict, because on the other hand, I didn't want to put myself out there. I didn't want to, and there's a lot of fear-based stuff. So now it's a whole lot different. Even when I went through cancer, I had to handle it like a warrior, and there were, it was rough spots to be sure, but I was more concerned about how I faced it than, first of all, for the sake of my family, and then for my own sake, and to face it with honor, as opposed to another way, whatever that might be. So
because suddenly it was something that you couldn't back away from.
Exactly. It was something I couldn't. Well, yes and no. The illness,
you could deny it. You could.
Well, the illness itself, I could have backed away from. I mean, I couldn't back away from, but whether I was going to fight or not, I could have. So the fight itself, especially when I was about halfway through chemo at one point, and things really started to go south with that. And the only way I could describe it, like I described it to my brother once, was from a line from Gladiator. It's the best way I could put it. Sometimes death smiles at you. All you can do is smile back. And that's what it was like. And I smiled back. And I kept pushing and fighting. And I would walk, even though I had hardly any energy left. I would still walk the floor, the hospital floor. When I came home, I had no immune system for about 4 months. Still tried to exercise, still tried to at least do Tai Chi or something. The major disappointment for me was I didn't drop an ounce from chemo. I'm like, are you serious? I have like every other symptom. Really? I can't like, I really? Not an ounce. Not an ounce. But that was reframed by the doctor, and that was proving the health of my system overall, that it held weight regardless. But it was that same kind of thing as with the weight loss, and even facing injuries or facing, it was a rough day at work. I really don't feel like doing this.
I'm hearing, I think, a connection between this and what you talked about again with the belt and the pants and so on, which not only about with the sort of waist size, not only about reaching those seeing the numbers go up, reaching those thresholds, but something about acceptance of reality. That it's, I can loosen it off a notch or a hole. I can go to a bigger belt. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. And suddenly the reality that, no, actually it really is. So there was something in there about accepting the situation as it is, rather than hoping it's going to change all by itself.
Yeah, there was a threshold point where it was like, this just isn't gonna go away on its own. It's been way too many years. Being Italian, holding weight is kind of what we do. We like to eat. It's also a challenge. So at some point, everything just hit together.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned about culture. I'm guessing that what you're saying there about Italian culture is you like to eat. Well, I guess everybody does, but is there something connected there around sort of social, family connections, relationships, that it's part of family life?
There's that.
Activity, I mean.
There's definitely that. But also it's just, it's almost an art in our culture. It really is. Like, you sit and you enjoy the food. We don't just eat the food. We experience the food, right? And it's, some of us, usually it's the plainest stuff you'll ever see, spaghetti and meatballs, whatever, but it's an experience for us, and
it's connected with that cultural identity as well as.
Yes, right. And the strong, for someone to sit and watch a Serie A Italian football game, and I'd like to have a cannoli, or something like that, and the Italian coffee to go with it, and all that stuff. It's just to almost an expression of the culture, of my identity as an Italian, so to speak.
So I wonder if there was a period of time when, as you reflect on it now, there was a period of time when you were gaining weight, and that period of weight gain had some motivation behind it. That was demonstrating something, or that was it wasn't something that happened by accident just because you were eating more, but it was something that also had its own benefits or payoffs in some way.
I guess, yeah, and that the payoff was I could avoid exercising, right? Because I just didn't. I mean, I did drop weight briefly during that time frame. I think it might have been just like 15 pounds or so. It was after seeing my pictures of myself at my daughter's sweet 16.
Ah, so seeing a photo of yourself. There we go.
And I was like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. So I dropped some weight, didn't last long, came right back.
That's a perfect example of what I was asking about earlier, that the external motive, it is motivating, but it's not persistent. It can be short-lived. And as you've said there, it's,
well, and I think
you
it's
have to make more of an effort around that.
to some extent it's because what you were saying earlier too about external motivators.
Mm.
You know, I'm looking at a picture of myself over there. It's an external motivator to some degree.
It
You
is,
know,
yeah. Because you've
only
never actually seen yourself from that point of view. So when you
right.
look at a photo, you're as if you're in somebody else's shoes, looking at yourself, having an opinion, feeling bad about it.
All right, it's a second position perspective,
Right.
almost. So, same thing. We're walking past the store window. You know, they say, "Nah, it's got to be something with that glass." You know, it's that amusement park glass. That's what it is. You know, it's not a real window. But like you say, it's short lived because it's an external motivator.
Hmm.
You know, you
and you said you lost about 15 pounds, so that was enough of a weight loss to feel a difference, and then you go back to, oh, I'm okay now then.
I'm okay now, and you know, business as usual. You know, and I thought for quite some time, at least the last few years, I thought I was eating fairly clean. I thought, and then I went on Weight Watchers, and the first day on the app, I said, I'm not going to change anything. Let me just see how this all shakes out, because I think I'm eating pretty well. Okay, well, I blew past the first half of the daily allotted points at breakfast. I was completely done by lunch and went over by dinner. And it was just poof. Oh my God. You know, I thought I was doing okay.
I think what those things, any sort of program like that, I think often what it shows is just how much our expectations of what's a normal amount to eat are corrupted by corporations that make a lot of money out of us eating a lot.
Well, or they're making money out of misdirection, right? Organic. Ooh, okay, that's cool. I'm eating organic. Well, yeah, and you look at the ingredients, cane sugar is organic, and there's 38 grams of that puppy in that kombucha that you're drinking, and it's like, you know, here you are thinking you're doing the right thing, and it's just, wow, you know, so you have all these holes, you know, whole grain, and then you check the points on it, and it's like 5 points per slice. You're eating a sandwich.
Yeah. And
right?
people drinking smoothies because they think it's fruit and it's natural and it's better than Coke, but actually,
Yeah, not by much. Yeah, the sugar contents on a lot of stuff is what really gets you. And by finally seeing that through the app and everything else, you know, a lot of the body aches and pains went away, because for a while I was on 6 ibuprofen a day just to be able to survive the day and be able to button my own shirt. You know, they were talking about early onset stuff and everything else, and my hands would wake up like that. I know my mom has rheumatoid arthritis, so I'm thinking, okay, that's the preview of what I'm going to be facing, and I'm already starting to go through it. I had a rapid heart rate with a flutter. Resting, like sitting here right now, I'm in 70 something. Back then it would be 115, 113 to 115 with a flutter, just sitting here.
And you said earlier that the weight loss, I forget the word you used, but it was something like superficial. And I agree. And it seems that it's the
I'm
way
66.
66. That's, I mean, yeah, that's very relaxed.
It's a lot better than 113.
Yeah. So, so yeah, the weight loss is just part of it. It's the overall health, lifestyle, longevity,
Mm-hmm.
being able to do the things that you love doing with the people that you want to spend your time with, your family and your friends and so on, and not.
Mm-hmm. And what you're willing to accept physically in terms of, like, I didn't want to be on 6 ibuprofen a day.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go on a heart medication that they wanted to put me on.
Mm.
I'm off 6 ibuprofen a day. I'm not on any heart meds. Dropping 42 pounds, doing the exercises, eating properly did the trick, right? So I get, that kind of, and I think, because I keep thinking, because that I'm a practitioner as well, and so I think in those terms. So I didn't want to like come out with shop talk language kind of stuff, but it's really how I think of it. So I could not. It was painful to identify as I am a fat person. And I think all of the perfect storm kind of stuff going on, what that really did was point that identity out to me.
Mm.
I am a fat person.
And that sounds very much like that, accepting reality as it is. Start
and like, no.
So all the stuff that we've talked around the change in diet, change in lifestyle, exercise, and so on, that's all the program, which anybody wanting to achieve the same is going to say, yeah, but I can do Weight Watchers, I can go for a walk. But how did he make that change in his mindset? And it sounds like there was something that brought you to a point where you made a comparison between your current self and your past self at a time in your life when you felt like you were at your peak. And these two self representations had become so far apart that was what really brought that home to you.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
When you were comparing externally, it was motivating. But actually, I think that would probably be part of the yo-yo pattern of dieting that we often see with programs like Weight Watchers and Slimmers World. My wife went to Slimmers World for a while, and we talked about how their systems often fuel the pattern of addiction. And she went to a meeting at the local group, and the woman who they had as Slimmer of the Week stood up and said, "Oh, it's wonderful. This is the 3rd time I've been at this weight, and this time I'm determined to stay here." She's absolutely describing the pattern of yo-yo dieting, and that will persist. And she's paying them her membership fee to go every week, and everyone's happy. So that's great. But I think for the people asking, how do I make that change in mindset? Because that's the hard thing. That's the anybody can get the app and try and follow the program, but the change in mindset. So what had to happen for that difference to be big enough for something to change in your mind and for all of this to become possible? So if we rewind to that moment where you're looking at the waist size, you're remembering yourself as you used to be, suddenly that what is the comparison that you're making? Is it about something in the way you look, something in the way you feel, what you're saying or hearing?
It probably would definitely start as an auditory function.
Okay.
In that, which is unusual because I'm actually highly visual, but the self-talk at some point reached where the comparison of identity between where I am now and where I used to be.
So I'm going to say
that comparison brought into stark detail my current situation.
When you say stark detail, what are you talking? an image there, or a
Um, more of a feeling. That was more kinesthetic of thing for that.
feeling? Because you said the word you used earlier was disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
I think disappointment or disappointed. Let me just check. Disappointed was the word you used earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointed is about expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a comparison. It's about expectations. It's about something that I expected has not come to pass. So that morning you went to put on your pants expecting to feel
Okay with it.
maybe not even notice. You don't notice.
Yeah.
Suddenly you felt something different, tighter or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was. And
Mm-hmm.
then that set off a chain of events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was the self-talk, the identity, the feeling was stronger, the comparison of that. And did you, when you remembered back to that younger person, when you said, I used to be an athlete,
Mm-hmm.
when you remembered yourself as an athlete, were you remembering how you looked, how it felt to be like that? What you were saying or
Primarily
doing,
how I looked.
how you looked?
Primarily. Mm-hmm.
And how, this might sound like an
Excuse me.
odd question, but how do you know how you,
Pardon me.
sorry.
It's okay. Get choked up every time I think. No COVID, folks. Get dry sometimes. I don't know why. I haven't even had a cigar yet. Go ahead.
This may sound like an odd question or an obvious question, but how do you know how you looked when you were an athlete?
I actually refer to pictures of myself in my head,
What do you
but
mean?
not like an internal image. I could see pictures of myself. Does that make
So
sense?
photographs of
Yes.
you
Yes.
competing,
I
or
could see right. Exactly. I see myself in competition, in uniform, practicing in my backyard, all that kind of stuff.
and how did you know in that moment how you looked then, whenever that, a year ago, when you had that realization? How did you know how you looked then that was different
Oh, I
to
can
how you
still
look now?
know. One picture in particular pops up into my head.
And is
An
that you?
actual photo, a picture of a photo of me, just with shorts. I'm shirtless and I'm in a posture, and it was just it was extremely slim. And I said, "Wow." I mean, there's really no reason I have to be in this condition at this age.
Okay.
And then the identities just couldn't coexist.
Yes. And so that moment around about a year ago, how
Mm-hmm.
did you know how you looked in that moment? So when you talked about identifying as a fat person,
Mm-hmm.
feeling the tight fitting of the pants, how did you know how you looked in that moment?
I just felt fat.
You felt it. So you weren't looking in the mirror or remembering a photo or anything recent?
No, and as you know, as I'm thinking of trying to remember that day, it's really just more along a kinesthetic line.
Uh-huh. So the feeling triggers the comparison, the feeling of disappointed, the self-talk follows. All of this seems to have an amplifying effect and a comparing effect. So the perfect storm, as you described it, seems to be that comparison process kick-started by the feeling, together with you framing the challenge as something which would maybe demonstrate that you were above average, would fulfill a need in you to demonstrate that you were brave and strong and you didn't back out of stuff, that you would rise to the challenge. And that would say more about you than your appearance or your weight or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair way to put it.
So that's an interesting how you described it as a perfect storm. And it's those two things, either one of those by itself wouldn't create the shift in mindset that's made it, I guess, from some other people's point of view, it looks like what you've done has been maybe not effortless, but it looks like you're really sort of in control of this now. Very interesting. Thank you for being so open and so candid with that.
It's fine. My pleasure.